the policy. I spoke to a good friend of mine who was a former head of a public corruption division of a USA's office. And he said that when he first joined the Department of Justice, wasn't working in Washington, they had, as a rookie or whatever they call them, Comey actually gave a talk to them about the most important thing is that we have is our integrity and that we are seen as not getting involved specifically in elections, right? Because this is the public corruption thing. And he said, you never, ever, ever, it is just like, it is a blanket binary policy. If you are literally like 4 or 5 or 6 months out at least of an election, you just don't do it. You don't make any investigation public. You don't bring any charges, even if it's clear. You just don't do it because it is the most important thing is that you're not, like, the primary paramount is that you're not interfering with elections or seen to be. And this was about as naked of an interference with an election as you could possibly get, which is scary because, what won't he do at that point?
Well, exactly. I mean, it's obviously, whether or not he did it as a blunder or whether or not he did it with purely partisan motives. The FBI is a tremendously powerful organization. And it's the National Domestic Intelligence Organization and the power that is vested in that agency. And I think there's good reason to believe that there was partisan activity going on within the FBI as well. Certainly Trump partisans were saying that there were, and there's plenty of documentation and evidence. People who are very connected with the FBI. People, there were people like Michael Flynn, Trump's new national security advisor, was going on TV saying he had friends in the FBI who were, quote, telling him things. Rudy Giuliani, various others. This idea that this national police force is operating on a partisan basis, there's nothing. The FBI has leaked for many years in many ways. And back in the 90s, they were certainly leaking on the Clinton, investigations to certain favored members of the press. So it's not new necessarily. But in the hands of Donald Trump, it's very, Trump is not like anyone else. He's the president. He has total control of the government at this point, or at least the Republicans do, with him at the head. And a partisan police agency like the FBI and the rest of them, by the way, who all endorsed Trump, like, the Fraternal Order of Police and the Immigration and Customs Service and, all of the Border Patrol, all these police agencies endorsed him. This is getting, it makes you nervous. Let's just put it that way. This is not good. This is not good.
And to add, what is not good is this. Just to pivot here a little bit, but in some respects, I don't know that we are. This whole private security force thing. This is the scariest thing in terms of the. And I'm trying to just organize my concerns about the Trump administration into silos, right? Just to keep it straight. The sort of the kleptocracy, which I think sort of overlaps a little bit with the authoritarianism in terms of encouraging it and growing it. And then just sort of the right-wing assault on our government, which is sort of a, I don't know, it shouldn't be a sideshow, but it's a separate silo. But the idea that he is keeping his own private security force, this I find terrifying. And it's unprecedented, isn't it? At least in modern times.
Totally. From the time the Secret Service was created, no president has ever done this. It's bizarre, and it makes no sense for his own safety purposes either, because according to this came from an investigative piece that came out of Politico this week, in which that these are his security. Well, he has a security chief who has hired a bunch of people, and they were with him on the campaign even after the Secret Service came on, which was early. Remember, it was like fall of 2015 that he got Secret Service protection. He and Ben Carson were the first two. And it's abnormal. Normally, you let go of your private security if you've hired it as a politician or a candidate the minute the Secret Service comes on, and for good reason. They are the most highly trained protective service in the world, and you don't want interference with them, right? And in fact, there are stories that Trump's security guys being untrained. They're cops or ex-cops or ex-FBI agents, but they're not trained in this specific way. That they've actually kind of interfered at times with the protection of Trump. Like when there was a guy, I think it was in Arizona, that tried to jump the stage, and apparently one of Trump's security guys, his head guy, kind of got in the way of how they normally do it. I mean, luckily nothing happened, but that's disturbing. I mean, the last thing we want is for anything like that to happen to a President Trump. I wouldn't wish that ever in a million years, because God only knows what would happen then. It's horrible. So, that is disturbing. And then the other side of it is, and this is what made me really kind of my stomach churn when I read about this security force is really there, apparently, to control dissent at gatherings where Trump is. In other words, protesters. And that has been their main job through the entire thing. And what they do is they wade into the crowd and they grab these people, and there's tons of footage of this, and kind of yank them around and drag them through the crowd, push them through the crowd, and the crowd, spits at them and yells at them and does all the usual stuff. Well, this is not normal. And the idea, all Trump has to do is kind of say, get him out of here. That's the line, right, that he uses. Get him out, get him out. And these guys jump into action. I don't want to, get too deeply into historical parallels here, but there is one big historical parallel that took place back in the 1930s where that same kind of protective service morphed into a major policing operation, and it became very, very dangerous for citizens. And, Trump is planning to continue to hold rallies throughout his presidency. And, in fact, he said just last week that this is how he plans to get the word out, is to hold rallies. So he's going to continue doing this and probably avoid the press. He's other than friendly interviewers who, like Sean Hannity or something. And he'll tweet if he can. He'll have friendly interviewers, and he's going to hold these big rallies. And with these guys in there kind of controlling whatever happens at these rallies, and all of that is just chilling. That's not American. That's not how we do things here.
I'll tell you, my fears about that, and it's sort of like, there's, part of what is difficult about contemplating this stuff is sort of, the classic Condi Rice failure of imagination type of a scenario here, because, and that's why I think it's certainly easy to poo-poo, like, let's talk to a survivor of the Holocaust, or let's talk to someone who has studied the rise of Mussolini or something, because people think, oh, you're getting a little bit carried away. But the problem is, like, we don't know what we don't know. And I'm going back through all the Bush administration figures here for sayings. But one of the things that scares me about this, like, private security force is not just that they're going to manhandle people at rallies. Like, what's going to stop one of these guys, the head of it, or any of them, from going into various agencies and just saying, like, I want this guy's license plate run, and I want a phone tap put on him, and you're not going to monitor it. I'm going to monitor it. I mean, what's to stop these guys who now, obviously they felt the authority in these rallies, right? But they're working for the campaign and the candidate. Well, now they're working directly for the president. There is
Yep.
no check. There is no, and you're not going to have guys on this force who are, who joined, you're not going to have that guy from Ohio who's like, I'm red, white, and blue and apple pie, and I'm going to join the force to serve the Constitution. And oh my God, I can't believe the abuse I'm seeing here. I'm going to go and tell the Inspector General. There's no guys like that on this force, right? I mean, these are all mercenaries who have been hired to be mercenaries, and they're not going to be bound by anything other than direct loyalty to Trump. And Trump, it's going to go both ways with this guy, right? I mean, there's not going to ever be a situation where the head of the Secret Service goes to the chief of staff, to Reince Priebus, and says, like, I got to talk to the president because this is out of hand. They're going to just say, go back to your office. I mean, there's no check on this. There's no short circuits.
Absolutely not. I mean, there's no short circuit. There's no oversight. It's reminiscent of the situation with the Iraq War contractors, Eric Prince and Blackwater. Those guys, there was no legal framework in Iraq to really deal with them, recall? I mean, it was like they could do anything. They didn't fall under the military code of justice, and they were exempt from the local laws. And, I mean, it's one of those things. It's kind of an extrajudicial security force. And, and think about this. I mean, here's another little extra added thing for your nightmares. I just read this interview with Richard Branson, who knows Trump and has met him several times, and he just did this little recollection. It was a few paragraphs long of having lunch with Trump, and all Trump talked about was how he wanted to get revenge on 5 people in his life who had done him wrong. I mean, this was like the sum total of the conversation. He was filled with vengeance, and Branson said to him, this is going to eat you alive. You really can't do it. And he just, he refused to even accept that. And it reminded me of that one of the first talks that Trump gave to, of all places, Liberty University, which was I think it was in 2014, so it was like 3 years ago, almost. And he spoke with Liberty University before we knew he was running for president. And that was the message that he gave those nice Christian students, was about, revenge is sweet. And, that's the most important thing, is to get revenge. It's interesting. People should look that up because it kind of sent chills down my spine when I first read it, which was, like 15, 16 months ago. So, imagine that. You've got Trump. He's got his own private security force. He's got, unaccountable to anyone. He has, if you were counting on, say, the deep state, NSA or CIA, who seem to be, at least the analytical side of the CIA seems a little bit leery about Trump. I don't know about the covert side. They seem, I'm sure they like him fine. They like torturers and overthrowers and people like that. But on the analytical side, which is generally a bunch of nerds sitting around looking at data, those guys, they might resist him. But this security force, if they have the same capabilities, or at least the ability to go and demand certain things,
right?
I mean, you just don't know what will happen. And by the way, let's not count on James Comey, right? I mean, is James Comey's FBI going to be our bulwark against Trump excess? I don't know.
This is very, very scary stuff. And you're right. I mean, there's plenty of examples of him talking about this revenge thing. And I would add, just to sort of add another overlay of lack of accountability, at the very least, as much as Blackwater was basically unaccountable through any procedures, someone at the end of the day was paying them, right? And theoretically, at one point, there could have been pressure on that person, like, stop paying them. Like, just stop paying them, end the contract. There's no one in that scenario here. It's Trump. There's no one who's ever going to say, stop paying this force. It's scary. I keep waiting for someone to just show up. And I think that's why, there was, I wasn't terribly surprised about the way Obama spoke the other day in his press conference about Russia. But there's a lot of people who don't follow politics who I think were like, what the heck is going on? Where's, everybody's sort of waiting for like daddy to show up and say, hey, all right, enough of this. Everybody, we had fun. Donald,
Okay,
please
yeah.
disband your thing. If you want to sit at the table, you've got to, put your pants on or whatever it is. And there's no one showing up to say this. Hey, it's Sam Seder. Why don't you subscribe to this channel? You can do so right over here. Over. Subscribe.